Hi everyone. Greyhound owners sometimes joke that they are greyhound slaves and that their dog has got them very well trained. So is this really true? Let's take a look at some of the characteristics of a well-trained behaviour and see if your dog really is inadvertently training you. So you've probably heard of Pavlov and his experiments with his dogs who began to salivate when they heard a certain sound. And this is called classical conditionings. The dog have associated that sound with the arrival of food in this case, and it triggered the salivation, and they couldn't control the salivation. That just happened in anticipation of receiving the food. And the same can happen with you. If I told you to think about your favorite food, the chances are you might begin salivating too. And if, say, you heard a bell at the start of that, you would begin to link the sound of the bell with the expectation of the food, and you might learn to salivate, or not learn, you might begin to salivate when you heard that sound. And that's classical conditioning at work. Most modern animal training is based on the work of B.F. Skinner, who researched how your actions influence your environment. And this is called operant conditioning, how you operate on the environment. And the idea is that you learn, in this case, that completing a certain action in response to a cue of some sort gives a set outcome. And in this case, the response is voluntary. So it's not something you can not avoid doing. It's something you choose to do. So if you want to achieve the outcome, you do a certain action beforehand. So in the case of food now, you would know you have to pay for it in order to get it. You can salivate as much as you like, but that's not to get you the meal. You have to pay before you receive the food. And we use these techniques to train our dogs to all sorts of things. They might be taught to sit, to lie down, to fetch, to come when called, and so on. But could this happen in reverse as well? Could your dog be training you to behave in a certain way? Let's take a look at what signifies a well-trained behaviour and see if you qualify as well-trained. So Gandalf is going to demonstrate for us. He's been training the editor for about 2 years now. And for his behaviour to be considered fluent, then we would expect that the editor will perform the required action when requested, and he will do it quickly, regardless of the circumstances. He'll do it precisely, and he'll do it as quickly as is possible. So let's see how Gandalf has got on with training the editor. The behaviour that Gandalf has been training is stroke my head or ears. And the cue for this that Gandalf uses is the editor is to do this behaviour whenever Gandalf comes near. And Gandalf is here testing whether the editor understands the cue in the context of sitting. Now we have a cue that Gandalf is using so that when the editor stops stroking, Gandalf gives his cue in order to ask the editor to continue. So great response here from the editor, very nice stroking. However, the editor stops and Gandalf now needs to use his cue to get the behaviour happening again. And his cue here is to raise his head or sometimes to raise his paw. So that's a little bit confusing of Gandalf because ideally we would stick with one cue. And we can assess the editor's learning by noting how quickly he starts stroking again once Gandalf has issued his cue. So that's not bad. He's doing it pretty quickly here. And notice how Gandalf is able to control the editor's behaviour using just the smallest, most subtle of cues. He's taught the editor the basics of this behaviour very well. However, the editor could be a little bit quicker to respond. He's still hesitating, and Gandalf shouldn't need to give his follow-up cue of lifting the front leg in addition to lifting his head in order to get the ear rub. It looks like maybe the editor's attention is wandering. It might be that Gandalf has requested too many repeats of this behaviour in one session, and it's more than the editor can deal with. So more training in smaller episodes is needed to perfect this behaviour before Gandalf can consider the editor is fluent in head and ear stroking. So there can be a level of response that differs to the cue depending on who is giving it. So to test this with our subject, the editor, Gandalf sends Floppy in to assess how well the editor is performing with the change to the setup. Floppy tends to use quite exaggerated gestures to give his cue for the required behaviour from the editor. So surely the editor should be able to work out what he's supposed to do. But even a change like that could be confusing. But here we go, perfect performance from the editor. Great work there, Gandalf. He just needs to work a little bit now with Floppy to improve his technique. So Floppy learns to give more subtle cues. He doesn't need to give such a big gesture. And consistency is really important. There's just no need to wave your leg around like that. And keeping the cue consistent, whether it's a sound or a gesture, will make it much easier for the editor to understand and help him know what's required of him each time. So Floppy, it's just a case of practicing. You'll get there eventually. And I'd love to hear how your dogs have been training you. Tell us in the comments down below what they've taught you and how fluent you are in that behaviour. That's all for today. We'll be back again soon. Bye for now. Look out for new videos every Monday, and why not subscribe so you don't miss out?